Hello Animator Islanders! Today I want to show you something that makes everything about your animation better. The poses, the staging, the timing, the motion, the writing, everything. And that magic concept is contrast. Welcome to Animator Island, your destination for animation contemplation. I can't wait to show you this concept and all the cases in which it can improve your art and your animation. At first, let's think about what contrast is. It's whenever you have two things that are vastly different if you compare them. If you have something small and you have something big, there's a contrast between them. Obviously there can be contrast in color, like this pink and this green are exactly on the opposite side of the color wheel. We also are breaking a pattern here. We have many letters and then we have one letter that's different. So contrast comes in many forms and can affect many fields of animation. And the first thing we are going to improve with contrast is our posing. Let's start with a single still frame at first. For example, we have this guy here who is wondering about contrast and what contrast can do for his pose. And I've already prepared a second version of that pose. Now, this is not perfect. This is a really quick drawing. Usually if you try to find poses, you would make 50 thumbnails until you find the best pose. But you can see that the second pose is already a lot more interesting. And that is because we applied contrast to many elements of the drawing. For example, this pose here is mirrored. This is called twinning, and it's not always bad. Sometimes you want to have a certain monotony or harmony or symmetry in your picture. Politicians use it to stress a very important point, but usually gestures are not symmetric. And so in this case, having one arm different than the other, applying contrast, one arm is straight, the other one is bent, makes it more natural and more interesting. In the second drawing, we have a lot more different angles, like everything here is kind of the same. And here we have something straight against something curved, which is also a very important principle in art and animation. And here we have it again, straight and curved or angled. And yeah, you can see that there is a little bit of a pattern here, but it catches the eye. Another thing that's very important is the line of action. In the first one, the line of action is just straight. There's a lot of line with not a lot of action. And in the second one, I guess this could be stronger, but we have a nice little S-curve. And depending on what poses you're doing, those line of action can really be very expressive. And the fascinating thing is that it doesn't stop here in the single picture. You also have to apply this principle over time. If we look at a context of two poses, we have the first pose here where our character is thinking, he's trying to get an idea. And then the second pose where he got the idea, I used contrast to make them different. To make it really stand out. Something new is happening that the viewer has to register as something important, and that's why I wanted to put a lot of contrast there. As you can see, I did again a similar thing with the line of action. We have a curved line of action here, and when he has his idea, his line of action is straight. There's this idea energy flowing through his body. This pose is a lot more, because he's thinking, he is more of an enclosed form. There are lots of angles here. He's closing himself in, and then in the second pose, he's opening himself up. There's all this open space now, and this arm obviously is now straight, so there are not as many angles. There are more straights now. The energy shooting through his body, but that doesn't mean that every pose should always be the exact opposite of the next pose. That would be a mistake, to always apply contrast. Because if you always apply contrast, you're left with no contrast anymore. It's like everything has the same importance. Everything has the same volume, the same noise. If you think about music, a lot of music has quiet parts and then louder parts and then aggressive parts, and it's changing, and we have to do a similar thing. And I did that by adding a second pose, because if we couldn't let the character just be in this pose for whatever many seconds he needs to get his idea. So I added a second pose, which is, well, it's not the same thing. There is the line of action is still the same, but his arms are now even more closed in. So we just intensified the first pose. So between those two poses, this one and that one, we don't have a lot of contrast. We're just intensifying the previous pose. And then this pose, that's like the resolution. That's the consequence. That's the important moment where something new is happening, where we break all these things in contrast. The interesting thing is that contrast, again, does not only apply visually and not only apply in the succession of poses. Contrast can also be used to improve our timing. Yeah, the most boring thing that we could do is we could make each of these poses 10 frames long. I added some poses where he goes out of the screen to complete the animation. And now let's look at how it looks when every pose has the same length. Yeah, it's not a good timing. I mean, we could even make it 20 frames, but that wouldn't improve anything, because we're not telling a story with the timing. We're not giving more information about what's going on with our timing. Everything has the same importance, and that does sound like a familiar problem now, doesn't it? Yeah, this is just like a slideshow. This is not animation. So to really turn this into animation, we have to think, what of these actions take a long time, and where do we want the viewer to get energy, to get a sense of something new is happening. So let's try to find a more interesting timing by mixing up the rhythm. Okay, so I think I found a timing that's a little bit better, and you can already, just by looking at how the frames are distributed in the timeline, you realize that we mixed it up. We broke the monotonous pattern. And yeah, that seems to be what contrast is about. We break monotony to make the important thing stand out. And important things can stand out on two different ways. In the beginning, we give the thinking a lot of time. And in the end, when he gets the idea, we're using shorter timing to communicate that there's now a lot of happy energy, that he got the idea and he wants to do whatever his idea was. An important thing to notice is that contrast doesn't mean that long holds are bad or that symmetric poses are bad, but that you have to use them. You have to make them special. You have to use them at the right time and at the right amount to make something interesting. People are always talking about the rhythm, finding the rhythm in your animation, but more often it's about breaking the rhythm. Like if you have something like a walk cycle, you have a rhythm, but if you are acting, it's usually about flowing in different speeds. If you act, you have things like the thinking that go slower, and then you have things that are more energetic and faster, just from the nature of what's happening within the character. Another visual thing that we could look into real quick is composition. Let's take this picture, for example, we have one character who is very sadly leaving the scene and one character who's trying to stop him, like, wait, there's still something I have to tell you. The way we used composition here, there's not a lot of contrast. We split the picture almost exactly in the middle. It's flat from the side, there's no perspective, the characters have the same size. It's like there's no contrast in here. Now let's spice it up with some contrast. Again, keep in mind this is only a very quick scribble, but yeah, you can almost go down the list what the elements are that I try to bring contrast in. Obviously, one character is now a lot smaller, while the other character is a lot bigger. One character doesn't have any headspace. He's enclosed in his sadness. He's trapped, and the other character he's left alone in the screen, and he has all this white space pressing down on him. Before we had a horizontal line going through the picture, and now we have a diagonal line. I pretty much just went down every possibility to make this picture more contrasty. And obviously, you shouldn't do that all the time. As I said, if all picture has a lot of contrast, then it's just a mess. But yeah, you should use your opportunity to communicate a little more about what's going on in the picture. Like I really like that he's trapped in his sadness here, and I really like that he's alone. He has no chance to reach his friend. It's not just a checklist, it's also symbolism that you can use to make your picture more interesting. And contrast can really help you to find these ways. So this method is actually used over the course of whole movies. If you think about Inside Out, Riley, the girl, the main character girl, in the beginning, there's always a lot of space around her to show that she has a life full of possibility. And after she moved with her parents, she's constantly enclosed by other objects in the screen, or there's constantly something in the foreground to press her into the corner. It's really interesting how filmmakers use this kind of contrast throughout the entire movie. So now let's move away from the visual stuff and look more at the writing side of things, where contrast can really help to make your stories more interesting. Just think about the characters that you put into your story. You could bring a character that is vastly different from the setting that he is placed in. For example, a bookkeeper on a pirate ship. Or you have two characters that have very different personalities, or you have two characters that have very different goals. In all these cases, because of these differences, you have conflict, and in the story we want to see how the characters resolve this conflict. If you want to read a little more about storytelling and stuff like this, we actually had a very recent article where this was also mentioned. Click the I or the annotation to read that. And the other big thing in storytelling is, again, very comparable to the timing thing that we just had in animation. In stories, things are going to get, more intense, and there's a big fight in near the end that resolves the big conflict of the story. And at this point in your story, things should be a lot faster, a lot more dangerous, a lot more, there's more at stake at that point. And usually stories start, with an exposition telling you the world rules, and it's not as fast paced as the boss fight at the very end. And of course, stories nowadays are more and more hectic, and action films already start in the middle of the action. But even then, if it's a good action film, it will probably have some calm scenes in between the action scenes, because otherwise you would be too exhausted to follow the action. Okay, so that's it for this overview. I hope you feel inspired to do more interesting stuff with this mighty tool that is contrast. If you found this video helpful and you would like us to make more of this, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And I can't wait to talk to you next time.